Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Deeply Rooted podcast by Planting Roots. Today, we're jumping into our series, So There I Was, where we get the opportunity to sit down with some awesome women and hear about their stories and just see the way that God is working and revealing different layers of his work as we talk to one another. Today, I'm here with my co-host, Liz, and then we're also here with Alyssa and Brianna, and we're super excited to have them on today. Alyssa is part of our team here at Planting Roots, and so we're really excited to get to talk to her and her twin sisters. So, Alyssa, do you want to introduce yourself, and then Brianna will pass it over to you?
Awesome. Yeah, my name is Alyssa Vandebunt. A little bit of context about who I am. I'm part of the Air Force National Guard, and I'm also the director of marketing for Planting Roots. I'm Brianna. I'm part of the Air National Guard as well, and I'm here as a guest, as Alyssa's twin, on this podcast. Thanks for having us, Erin and Liz.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. We're so excited to have not one, but two of you. So I'm super excited to jump into this conversation. And I think if we could start by you all sharing your story, sharing your testimony, and how God has worked in your life and what got you to where you are now.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a really good question. And if I were to pick a season of my life that I was really aware of the Lord and his presence and authority in my life, it would actually be back in high school. And I can kind of get into the ways that the Lord has worked to this day and kind of counter flip that with my ministry and youth ministry. But it was around high school that Brianna and I were both on the cross country track. We just kind of grew up running, and that was somewhere we were really able to just put our efforts into accomplishing something that challenged us. So yeah, we did cross country in high school, and then it was around our junior year that we started going to a new church. Our family started going to a new church, and it was more of a non-denominational. We grew up really Catholic, so just kind of going to church, and that was really where we were able to get a glimpse as to what it looks like to know the Lord and to love the Lord. And I actually remember, I don't know what you remember about this, but our first time really connecting to community of boys and girls that were our age at the time, Brianna and I were both sitting there just kind of in awe of just the evidence and the fruit of the Spirit of those in the circle around us. And it was something that I yearned for. I think my heart and my soul really yearned for that type of companionship and relationship with others who were really just desired Christ in their life. So it was at that point that just getting that exposure, I was really able to kind of individualize what that relationship and companionship with the Lord was or is. Brianna, yeah. So not to be redundant with that, but something that's really cool is just being a twin and having that bond together. We've experienced a lot of monumental moments together, and one of those beautiful moments was really coming to my faith. So I would say a pivotal point in which my faith really developed was, in fact, going to that new, it was a Bible study at the church that we were now attending. Just a little background, just growing up Catholic, I know a lot of people that have a similar testimony of, you go to church and Catholic is very regimented and formal, and it was almost in a language that I couldn't understand. And so we went to church, but when it comes to embodying the fruit of the Spirit, I feel like I was living my life in the middle of the fence. So I felt like I had a relationship with the Lord, but it was very lukewarm, and I wasn't, following it up with my actions. And so when I started going to this Bible study, that's when the Holy Spirit really took hold of my heart, and it was in a supernatural way where I was like, wow, this is really this is God, this is the Holy Spirit acting here, because I felt conviction in certain areas of my life, and I really was able to understand what conviction and what community was. And that's when I fully decided to submit my life to Christ, and not only follow it up with knowledge, but with wisdom and actually, within my actions. So going through that season, just kind of allowing the Holy Spirit to act and building in good relationships and community. That was our senior year, going into our freshman year of college. And when we got to college, I ended up joining a church here in Westchester, and that's where my journey really continued to go. So just to give a little context also, when we were deciding in that process of where to go to school, my dad really took it upon himself to start exploring. So we were really looking at D2 schools that we could be part of their running program. And so our final decision was like around an hour and a half away from home. And then we were also at this point looking into different Air Force National Guard bases. So we were really in between the two that we were in between was like University of New Hampshire, and that would be like Pease Air Force Base. And then it was Westchester University, which is Willow Grove's Biddle Air Force National Guard base. So I think it was probably 2 months before we actually needed to make a decision that we started just praying about it. We knew that we wanted to go together, so that wasn't really up in the air or in question. But we just started praying about it and really allowing just the Lord to guide our steps and what we felt was best for the desires that we had as far as Air Force and then running program and just being able to balance all that. So we came down to the decision of Westchester. We did cross country, winter track, and spring track there. So just meeting the girls and the community and people that would surround us during our duration at school was super encouraging just to see how the Lord orchestrated that. The coach, who was our head coach at the time, took a lot of interest in Brianna and I, and he was encouraged by us just sharing our faith and our love for the Lord, our new love for the Lord. And so that was just kind of what centered us in our decision, being Westchester. So yeah, I think becoming part of the church that we're actually still part of was exciting. And I just remember my mom, our first semester of school, we were doing just like school and then running, and my mom would come down every single Wednesday to take part in like a course that Providence Church was like offering. And I just think that at that moment, I really began to establish the desire and the need for people to surround my table as far as like community goes in your Christian walk. Just because we had our teammates, which were great, like that sense of we did hard things together, just with our training program and in general, just the friendships that we were able to have was beautiful. But also when we talk about growing in faith, I think, you're stepping into everyone from different walks, and the beauty that is shared in coming together in unity of Christ to learn more, to grow closer to each other was just something that, again, what the thing that my heart was yearning for was kind of being presented as an opportunity. So
Well, awesome. Thank you both for sharing. I think I related to numerous things in both of your stories, but one thing that you both mentioned was just the joy that you saw in other people when you first came to Christ, and just how like seeing it in somebody that was closer to your age kind of helped you along in your own faith journey. And that was definitely the same for me. And then Brianna, something that you had mentioned was just how there were probably, I don't know if the right word is steps in your faith journey, but there was a point where you, knew that God was real and that you wanted to pursue him, but then there was another point where you started like living in a way that glorified God and was actively seeking towards him. And I would say that was definitely the same for me. It's funny because there was the year that I got baptized. Fun fact, Liz is the one who actually baptized me. We were on a mission trip in Puerto Rico at the academy, and we were in a river in Puerto Rico, and I was like, you know what, this is real. I want to live my life for this. So I had that moment, but then there was another moment following that a few years later, and it took me a long time to actually realize that knowing Christ and following him isn't just like him being a genie in a bottle that you get to pray to and get whatever you want. It's like actively choosing every day to get closer to him. That there are ways that we can do that by following what's in the word and by, surrounding ourselves with community and infrastructure that's going to bring us closer to him. I guess one question I have for you both, since a lot of your faith has been, a lot of your life being twins and everything has been together. And I find myself, doing this sometimes, even though I'm not a twin. Have you ever found your faith kind of being based upon the others, if that makes sense? Like, have you ever, because this is both a good thing and a bad thing, and I'd love to get into it more. Have you ever found one, encouragement from each other when you're struggling in your faith, but then also have you ever found reliance where sometimes you're too heavily relying on each other's faith and not building it yourself?
yeah, that's a really good question. So going, deeper into my journey, because like you said, there's steps. So, you have the introduction of like, I love the Lord, and then kind of like following that journey, that's a start. And then there's a whole path along the way. So to go deeper into my story, after doing the first semester of college and doing that course that Alyssa had talked about, we went to basic training separate. So I was the first to leave, and it was in January of 2018. And that's the first time that we were really separated since birth for more than 2 weeks. And that's really where I grew really deep into my faith. And it really, the foundation of my faith really started and was in the works when I was away for basic training. I was able to center myself on my own thoughts, my own relationship with God, and grew closer in that silence because I didn't have the busyness of the world. It was just like me and 40 other women, and getting to know them and getting to know maybe their, journey of life and where their faith is. And it was very encouraging. But without Alyssa, I was known as Vandebunt Brianna, and it was unique because we were always known as twins. And so that kind of allowed me to kind of grow along my path. And I don't think that I was ever in comparison, like we were never compared with our faith, because I believe that we both have like fruit, and it's just in different ways. And my strengths are different than Alyssa's strengths. But I would say that's like where I learned like more of my independence. And she was always a person that I could rely on to tell me the truth, whether it was hard to hear or, very encouraging things to hear. I could rely on her that she's going to keep me accountable in things that I was going through and maybe decisions that I had to make. And I guess this kind of leads me to getting back from basic training. I finished school for the next 3 years, which was good. Like running was definitely a job, and it was like hard. So it taught me a lot of discipline, similar to what the military taught me, and kind of pushing through even when it's tough. And that's something that my faith, cross country and track, and life has taught me. It's pushing through past the pain, because that's essentially where you learn the most. You're strengthened through those hardships. And, in Romans, it talks about trials and tribulation, endure perseverance, which leads to character. And that's a verse I've meditated on a lot over the past few years. And, going deeper into my faith, I think that I was tested. It kind of reached its peak where I felt as though I was growing like at a really fast pace and just like growing closer and closer to God, like almost sprinting towards Him. And I kind of got to a point where at the time I was in a really good relationship with someone that was yoked and beautiful in their faith. And I found myself almost like you come to a certain contentment where you're like, wow, this is awesome. But for some reason, I feel like it's almost the pole of this world of like, look elsewhere, look at this world. And I feel as though I became distracted. That was also when she was overseas. So we were separated at basic training, and then she left for overseas. And that is where like she was on deployment. And that is when I felt isolated and alone again. Like, except this time, like I really felt alone because I wasn't in a flight of 40 women, with no phones, and we're all doing this together. It was me doing my civilian job and, in a really good relationship, but still feeling very alone because at the time we were doing distance. And after 2 years of that relationship, I essentially came to the point where I was like, okay, I don't have my sister. I was going through a transition with my work on the civilian job, and I just felt like I just need to like focus on where I'm at. And I ended up getting out of that relationship, and I felt as though I reached a rock bottom again. But there was such fruit in that and such beauty, because the person that I was in a relationship with had taught me so much. And I think it's like truly a gift from God, and through community, He taught me what it is to like really lead with faith as a foundation. Like something that he did was like he had just consistent character, and I admired that so much about him. Like whether it was like as my significant other, but more so of as like a man of God, as far as like his impact, because he was also military, but his impact on his people and the way that he was just firm, and he can credit the Lord for that just steadfastness and that consistency. And I feel as though through that relationship, although it was really hard looking back, like this is 3 years ago, it was really hard to exit that relationship and be like, what did I take from this? Because now it just feels like everything's crumbling and it's like over. But something that he specifically had taught me is when things get hard, like you are to rely on your faith. And he taught me the kind of person I want to become. So in this world of distractions, a lot of the time this generation looks at the what you want and the what you want to become, what you desire. And something that this man had taught me was, focusing more so on the who you want to become. And I wanted to focus on the character of the Lord, the character of like consistency, the character of, again, consistency comes through like pushing through the hard and being the person that is truthful and isn't caught up in white lies, but is steadfast and truthful, and someone who is just honest. And those are qualities, like, again, everyone has their flaws, but these are qualities of this person. And that's like what I've been really focusing on and developing on for the past 3 years. And looking back, I can truly say, like, through that pain, through that heartache of like really just being broke down to essentially bare bones and having to rely on the Lord again, it's given me such experience and exposure that shapes me to be the person I am today. And I do credit that 100% towards God, but also that person. And although, I'm sure being in relationships, like, it's hard when it ends, and like to find purpose of like what was the purpose of it. But I think that like through God, like he makes he makes it flourish. Yeah. And this actually, I'll let Lissa take the verse, but like it's her verse. But yeah, so the verse that actually resonates with my heart is Isaiah 43:18 to 19. And it says, "Remember not the former things, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." And so, similar to Brianna, I think the beauty of having companionship as far as twins go, that twin dynamic, is being able to experience things for ourselves, but also taking, like, as a whole, the same lesson. And so I think even through seasons of being separated, Brianna and I have learned similar lessons. And so going back to that season of the first time we were apart for more than 2 weeks, Brianna did go first to basic training. So that's 2.5 months. And then her tech school was a few months as well. We both have different jobs in the Air Force National Guard. So I had a little bit more tech school, which just in all was around 8 months completely apart. Fun story, I just want to give a little bit of insight, is when she graduated basic training out in San Antonio, Texas, I got to go fly out, see her graduate. She pretty much gave me the rundown of basic training, what to expect, that type of thing. And just hearing her word and receiving letters from her, like, I had a pretty good idea as to what to anticipate. And so I felt really confident just kind of walking in or beginning to do it myself. But yeah, got to see her, went home. 2 days later, I shipped out. And before I even get into that, I think before, like, when she left, that was a pivotal point of my faith. And to be honest, like, she described that season as very fruitful and encouraging, but for me, it was quite the opposite. I felt, again, alone, but more of, instead of really going towards the Lord and sitting in his presence, I was running around in the opposite direction, just kind of trying to fill myself and my life with things that I would find contentment in, but it really led to more of a distraction and uncenteredness. And so really I spent that season, instead of really, now I know to like get into the word and to be in solitude and just having a place for him. I didn't, like, just to straight be quite blunt. I didn't really have much of that. And so I was really just looking forward to the time where I'd be able to be challenged. And honestly, this was the first time in my life that I wasn't go, go, go. So before that, high school, like, I having 3 seasons of like cross country, winter track, spring track, high school, whatever. And then doing college, like, it was always on to the next thing. And so for the first time, I had 2.5 months to really do nothing. I had the choice of if I was going to fill that time with things that would grow me or things that would distract me and make me a little numb to the season I was in. And I think that was beautifully orchestrated because I really found myself kind of in a place of uncontentment because I was trying to go my own way. And instead of surrendering to the Lord and being still and really diving into the companionship I have with him, I didn't. I just distracted myself. So leading into basic training, like it was nice to be busy again and have that type of like schedule and discipline. I really do thrive on discipline and having a routine in place. And so I felt good. And then after I graduated, I had another 4.5 months of tech school. So I went to Missouri and I was there, also training for the next season of cross country. So that was a very isolated season of my life. And I think as much as I thrived on having control over the training plan that my coach was providing me, as well as, really being intentional about learning my job in the Air Force National Guard, it was good, but also that sense of community wasn't there. There's something that I really yearned for. And I'm really grateful for that, because sometimes instead of always desiring something, you have to be content with what you have. And the Lord had placed really good mentors in my life. I was part of a Bible study there that airmen were able to take part in, which was such a blessing and such an opportunity through the organization crew. So I did have that sense of friendship and sense of purpose as far as growing in my faith with others. But again, I think a lot of my identity came from, okay, how hard can I train? How well can I do this job that I'm here to do? And less about the way that I feel about myself doesn't necessarily come from those things. It comes from my identity solely in Christ. And so I was really being able to understand that in that season of, again, loneliness is the only way I could really describe it. But really what I put my faith in, what I put my identity in, and how I feel about myself, not in the things of this world. There are opportunities and there are tools that the Lord has placed in my life to use me, to grow me and prune me. But at the end of the day, that's not where your identity comes from. So coming back and being reunited, that's kind of where we are. It was our sophomore year. It was really nice, but it was also kind of a change of pace, just because I've been so used to like military and what that type of structure looks like. To go back to college was different but good at the same time. And just for context, the trajectory of that is we graduated high school in 2017, graduated college in 21, and obviously now we're in 24. So we're 25 years old. We have 7 years on the military side. So all of that is like, I think that the foundation of our faith and our relationship with God started in that beginning period, the first like 3 years of joining the military and going through college. We've dealt with a ton of adversity and struggle, essentially, that has shaped us and the core of our foundation of our relationship with Christ. But
Whenever you guys were talking about the different trials and adversity that you guys faced, like in school and in the military, it reminded me of the verse in James 1 where it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." And I think that resonates with me in my story as well. What you guys were talking about is very similar about like finding God through like-minded people worshiping the Lord, and how like that lit you on fire for the Lord. It's like that was the same for me. And I felt that way as well. And sometimes whenever we're in that trials, we're reminded of like going back to the Lord and putting him first. And so even though it can be hard to be in the middle of adversity, we can consider it pure joy, because it's what leads us back to the Lord and leads us back to him. And I wanted to talk a little bit more. You guys have been talking about your background in the military. I wanted to talk about like what made you guys want to join the military, and like kind of explain like the National Guard process, because I'm not super familiar with it. And I'd love to hear more about it and how you guys picked that and got involved in that, and what you necessarily like do in the National Guard, and like talking about the deployments you've done and all that.
yeah, so I guess I'll start. I'm pretty sure our stories or our reasoning for joining is pretty similar. But I would say in the very beginning, I knew that I wanted to run cross country and track. And my dad was in the Navy. And so he introduced the idea of the Air National Guard. And to be frank, I was not really familiar with the difference between Guard, Reserve, or active duty. And so I didn't really know it was feasible to do the 1 week in a month and a few weeks during the summer. But I ended up looking at some of the Guard and Reserve bases. We actually went to an active duty base in the state of New Jersey. So it was McGuire. And my dad's really good friend, who was in the Air Force, kind of showed us around. and I saw the camaraderie and the unity of that community, and that's ultimately something that I wanted to be a part of myself. And so we started looking at different guard units around Westchester University, and we ended up enlisting our senior year of high school. And from that, we did our first year of cross country and track before going to basic training, and we took the spring semester off of our freshman year, and then did the next 3 years of school and acquiring the necessary credits. But that in itself was, I think that while I was in school, I was like a baby airman. I was newer, and I was just developing like different skills and the skills that the military allows me to embody. And then I started focusing, when I graduated college, I started focusing more so on leadership and what leadership meant to me, the kind of leader that I desired to be, and maybe some leaders that impacted me in some special way. And once you graduate college, for the Air Force at least, you just need a degree to commission to become an officer. And so you need a degree, you need to take a test called the Air Force Officer Qualifying Test, and then you needed a few other check in the boxes. And I remember in that season, I was dating someone that had the trajectory of commissioning, and he kind of opened that idea to me of like, oh wow, that's feasible, and that's what it looks like. And I started just kind of researching it more, and I realized that's definitely something that was a dream in which I feel as though the Lord put certain dreams or just passions in your heart, and that's something that was placed in my heart. And at that time, I wanted it then, and I wanted it at that moment. And I ended up going into the test I had to take really confident because I had a degree. And I did not pass a certain section. It was broken up into 12 different categories, and I did not get the minimums in which was required. And so I was like, okay, why? I was kind of in question of God, why? I think I'd be a great leader. And so at that point, I decided to focus on experience on the civilian side. So in the world of sales, sales is essentially a skill, and a lot of higher up companies look for 2 to 3 years of experience in it in order to kind of get to the next level. And so I was like, cool, I didn't pass the Air Force test. Let's take a little break from the military and just do the requirement. And I focused on gaining experience on the civilian side. And a ton of doors opened. I really enjoyed that journey. But then as of recently, so fast forward 3 years after graduating and taking the test, this past winter, I decided that I felt developed as an NCO. So I made it to technical sergeant, and I felt like I was starting to really learn leadership and understand it and embody the kind of leader that I desire to be. And so I decided this past winter to take up a temp AGR tour. And
describe what AGR is.
Yeah, so a temp AGR tour is just active duty time. I was working on base, and I was in the base training and education portion of my squadron. And so my Air Force job is in the Force Support Squadron. So we have it's a very diverse shop. So it's anywhere from fitness, lodging, dining facility, base training and education, personnel, which does the ID cards and retirement, all promotion, all the paperwork for the back end. And so I've been in fitness for pretty much the entirety of my career. But I decided to kind of just look into the base education and training and kind of learn about a different section. And I gained such mentorship over the winter from people that I interacted with but didn't really know personally. And that was 4 months that I was working on base, and I was able to carve out some time every day to study for this Air Force test. And by the end of my time there on that temp AGR tour, I took the test and I passed. And that was really where I saw a lot of I saw God's light, because that was something I was praying intentionally for. I was like, God, may your will be done. And that was something that was really hard, just moving back to that relationship of submitting to him and just being you have full control over every aspect of my life, even though I want to gravitate and grab onto it so much. I just I could put in the work, and all I know is I'm preparing myself, and if it's God's will, I submit it to him as far as passing and having the opportunity to commission. And so when I passed that, I just saw all the fruit of like the past, like the labor over the past few years of like God just being like, yes, no, or slow. And back 3 years ago, it was slow and it was like hard to accept. But now I'm just seeing the way that He has refined my leadership, refined me as a person that like is following Him and being a vessel for Him. And it's amazing. And so at this point, I'm back to my civilian job. So just the normal guard status, 1 week in a month, few weeks during the summer. And I have a commissioning board within my unit. So if I, this might be getting confusing, but I took the test April 4th. We had drill that weekend and I found out my results on April 6th. And then on April 7th, leadership had opened the officer spot in my unit. And so we have that commissioning board in August. So at this point, I'm just trusting God in the fact that He can open doors. And if I'm the best qualified person for this position, I would gladly take it and hopefully lead and inspire others within my shop and, across the military and Air Force. But if there's another person, I just know that God has me through it all. And I am to be and called to be fully reliant on Him and to trust His plan, just like He's provided for me each step of the way, to trust Him in this season of waiting. Yeah, I love that. And just being able to see that secondary for Brianna, experiencing it, like I am one of the closest people to her. Just the way that she kind of took failure and then was able to persevere through it. Like that's something that she got kind of caught up on. I think that when you experience like just something that you kind of came short of and just reasoning why, it can be very challenging to get your mindset in a way that's I'm confident in the fact that I can do things even though I might not have been able to do it the first time. So that was very encouraging. And just seeing her reliance on the Lord during the season of really putting in the work, but also trusting that in the season in between, the Lord can really do amazing things that, if she were to have commissioned right when she graduated college and that door would have been open, she would also be at a loss of all the experience and wisdom she's been able to gain over the past few years. Similar to Brianna, we have different jobs in the Air Force National Guard. So me specifically, I'm part of the 270th Engineering Installation Squadron. And then just to go back to my story and the differences between our careers is I graduated college and then I had around 6 months before I was going to deploy in 2022, January 2022. So in that interim or in between, I did get a job, more of the corporate role at a company that was doing recruiting for IT firms or different smaller companies. And so it was really during that time that I learned so much through challenge. So my role specifically was to recruit, so find individuals who would be fit for a role. And I think the challenge in that is it's a mass, you're calling people, you're pretty much cold calling. And I knew that wasn't my end all be all, but it was a skill that I was going to have to learn, like just as a leader, like you learn communication so you can be effective at it. And so it was really the first time that I was faced with a really big challenge of people weren't seeing me face to face. They were simply seeing how well I was able to communicate with them over the phone, to really hear about where they're working, if they're happy, if they're on the job market, and learn about a little bit about their story so that I could potentially be a resource for them for their next role. So during the duration of those 6 months, I was challenged. And at this point, I was also in anticipation of going on deployment and what that would bring. So just in a season of transition. And I think me, similar to a lot of humans, transition can always be a challenge in itself just because there's the fear aspect, there's the preparation aspect, there's just a lot that goes into it. And it's really how well you're able to face not only adversity, but the aspect of control. So I ended up doing that for around 5 months. I was happy when it came to an end. I really got what I desired from it, but was also ready to move on. And I had the opportunity to then deploy with my unit. And we were in Qatar for a bit and then ended up going to Jordan, which was probably reflecting one of the most beautiful seasons of my life, just because that was really the first time I was still with the Lord. And that was the first time that the only word I could really describe as or define that season as is just surrendering. Just surrendering what I desire for like what the Lord desires, and really being able to see his hand and where he was leading me, and to see where the things that he would be able to provide, only he would be able to provide, to sustain me. So yeah, that was just a season of just realignment. So when I got back, I just felt refreshed and my spirit was really renewed. And coming home, I think I was really around 6.5, 6 weeks before officially going home from deployment. It was really put on my heart to start praying about what that next season looked like. And so I remember I would have like just time after working out in the morning where I would just walk and just pray, just to have that time with the Lord. And it was during that time that it was evident that he was asking me to just really start thinking about what I desired. In the next season. So I was really praying about my community and the people that would surround me in my next job, just because I knew that I was going to be looking once I got home. And I was just kind of saying the basics of I want to be a vessel for you. I want the people to be encouraging that surround my table. And I was really being called to think more deep about it. And so I really started thinking about the mission and the vision, and really about how I wanted to impact those around me, and how I wanted to be poured into. And so that was encouraging and exciting. So when I got home, I did a bunch of networking. I started talking to just different people, and seeing really what was on the job market. And that was really just one of the ways that the Lord has provided for me is just through where he's placed me as far as my job goes in the civilian side. I really am so grateful, and it has been such an answered prayer as far as mission and vision, and again the team that I'm working with. So just for a little insight, the reason I say that is because the company I work for is actually 80% military. So a lot of just their previous experiences definitely encouraged me. Still being like having the aspect of military in my life, and yeah.
What you were saying is really encouraging me. Just when you're talking about points of transition in our lives, and viewing them as opportunities versus a challenge. Because I think sometimes, I mean, as human beings, I think we're kind of resistant to change because we get comfortable and things are easy when they're predictable, when we know it's coming next. And the whole reason I'm in my car right now is because we just PCS'd and I don't have Wi-Fi in my house, and it's like, it's one simple example of like the discomfort that comes with times of transition. And one thing my husband has always said is that when things change, like whatever it may be in life, we always have the opportunity to either get closer to God or you're going to fall away, because that's, I mean, all of what life is. If you're pursuing the Lord, you're going to get closer to him. But if you stop pursuing, then you're not just going to stay where you're at, you're going to fall away. And so that's just really encouraging me to use those points of transition, even the one I'm currently in right now, as opportunities to pause. I think sometimes we're resistant to rest, and we're resistant to moments where things are more still than normal. I have a week before I start back at work, and even in that week, it's now encouraging me to like pause. And even though things are uncomfortable and I want to try to control my way through it, I can rest and let the Lord work and reflect on where he has me and what things he's doing in the right now. Brianna, one thing that you were talking about was just how, I mean, both of you, I feel like this is how life goes. We think we kind of know what's coming next, and we can plan as much as we want, but ultimately, like, you look back at your story, which is why I love the series, and see so many parts of the puzzle that God revealed that you didn't necessarily understand at the time. And it reminds me of, I think it's a C.S. Lewis metaphor. I'm not sure if it's from him, but he kind of, or whoever it was, talks about how, like, when we're in construction, like, sometimes we think that God metaphorically is building, just a house in the suburbs. Maybe he's just, building a small house. And so you're like, okay, gearing up for the renovations and everything, like, in your life. And then soon, like, there's things that are being torn down. You're like, wait, that wall was supposed to stay there. Like, I like that kitchen tile. Like, there's things that he starts renovating, pulling out, uprooting that you didn't necessarily see coming. And then when you get to the finished product, you realize he's building like a beautiful castle, like, building much more than we even anticipated. And so I think it's really cool that both of your stories, just each step along the way you didn't necessarily expect or see coming, but you kept taking the next right step. And that's really what God asks us to do. I mean, he says his word is a light unto our feet, but it's not like a searchlight unto our feet. Like, we don't get to see the entire picture right away. We just get to keep taking the next step, and he's going to point out what that is to us if we're faithfully in his word and in community and in prayer. So thank you just for, sharing your story and giving me that insight, at least. Earlier on, you kind of mentioned, Brianna, that like you haven't necessarily like felt the competitiveness between the two of you. I know that, like, I feel like for me, as someone who's not a twin, I like see twins and I'm like, oh, maybe they're like, I wonder if they're competitive, like growing up. Like, even me and my younger sister, we're not the same age, but we still have some of that competitive spirit. And I think that naturally the type of women who are in the military community have to be, even, military wives, they have to be tough. We have to be, willing to endure hardships, and we have to be, in a sense, like striving to do well in our work. Like, that's also what the Lord calls us to do. But have you ever found that you guys have, butt heads, or even with other people, other women, had conflict in your relationship at all? And if so, we'd love to hear about it and how you resolved it. But if not, do you have any tips for us? Because I know that even myself sometimes like get caught up in the rat race of the military, that the military is of always pursuing the next rank. And it's tough. And I want to remain rooted and content in where God has me. So if you have any insight on that, I would love to hear it.
Yeah. I would say when it comes to Alyssa and I, when it comes to that competition, I am a competitive person, whether it's, on the cross country and track team. Like, she was my biggest competitor. So when it came to races, like, who was I looking at? Who did I care who I was around? It's her. And so whether it's like me in cross country chasing her down, or her, you were always chasing me down. Yeah. For cross country, having her, like, whether it's in front of me or right next to me, like, we were fine. We would tackle it together. And so whether it's like passing the next girl or getting around, like, there was actually a point in which I was faster than you. So for cross country, and then we had different events in track, but she was definitely like, it was a good competition. It was a healthy one, because at the end of the day, there's no one that I want to run a race with other than her, because we're strong together. And I do believe that we are stronger together. Yeah. And that's something, like, looking into the future when it comes to a spouse or significant other, like, I feel as though when you're stronger together as a unit and pursuing Jesus, like, that's, it's a good covenant. Yeah. And that's something that, like, for Alyssa and I, like, she's taught me that, as far as like when it comes to that twin bonds, like, we definitely are stronger together, but we're also strong independently. Because like, sometimes I seem like I don't talk and I mute when I'm with her, and it's like us together, but when it's me individually, people think I'm a fairly talkative, extroverted person. Yeah. But when it comes to career, when it comes to working up your ranks in the military, a lot of the times it comes to what slots are available, whether it's enlisted or commissioning, and it's highly competitive. So when it comes to competition, like, you can control yourself. And this is something that, especially on the sales side, when I'm mentoring and coaching people, I focus on what you can control. And there are some things that are controllables and non-controllables. And essentially what it comes down to is, like, who's going to be more innovative and come up with a solution and be able to execute it. And that person will win the rank or win the promotion when it comes to work, or be a top performer. And I think the competition is good, but not when you're tearing others down. Like, competition when you're like, pushing everyone else to the bottom, like, that's not, no one's winning. Like, there has to be, like, winning sides. And something that I found in the military is, like, especially in sisterhood and just with women that I work with, I think it's empowering them. So empowering myself, like, and empowering the people that I work with is huge. So if I'm able to work better with someone else, and I'm able to work with more diverse people, like, that makes me more of an asset, which will may most likely incline me to be, to get to the position or the rank in which I desire. And I think that the most successful people, when it comes to leadership, like, if it's tied to the Lord and what God had, Jesus Christ on this earth really showed, as far as like mentoring and develop even broken people. If I'm able to do that and embody those characteristics, like that's going to make me a good leader, and that's going to get me farther than I can even imagine for myself. I think it's more so being selfless, like that kind of leadership in itself, like the selfless leader, the servant leader, is going to get to where they're going to reach that top tier, but it's by helping others around them, not being selfish. So when it comes to competition, I embrace competition and I embrace challenges, but I'm not looking to be like top of the top. I'm not looking for the recognition and praise, and I'm looking for others to also feel validated and feel successful. Yeah. To succeed along with me. Because that when you look at the military and the top units, the top teams, whether it's athletics or, whatever, it's how well are they working together? How well is everyone succeeding? Not just the person in charge that gets the praise. Are they succeeding? It's more so it's everyone from top to bottom succeeding. So, love that. And actually, something that I just thought about is Westchester's motto, or for all the athletic teams, is like "Together we're golden." And I always thought about that kind of in college, of that being Brianna and I, because it's true. I think having a twin and having her on, the cross country winter and spring track team, it's something that I always have my thoughts on, like, how well is she going to do it? Is she going to be able to outperform me? And so when we're training together, we train hard. When we're doing a maintenance run, like, we're doing it to get to be good on race day. And so same goes with in life. I think I look at Brianna as, yes, she's competition, but she's also someone that I desire to be thriving as much as like for myself and for others. And so seeing her flourish makes me happy. And I also, I think that type of dynamic it's healthy and it's good. I never thought of her as someone that I needed to beat in order to feel better about myself. It was simply like, if I beat you, I'm going to be really happy. But at the same time, if you're able to beat me, like, great, I'm going to cheer you on. I'm going to be like, that was great. Good job. And something that I will just give credit to for Brianna is when we are together, typically I'm like the alpha, like everyone would be like, oh yeah, like Brianna's a little more quiet. And I also feel that we both have impact, we all have influence if we're being used as a vessel of the Lord, but Brianna, in the way that I've been able to see her impact people in through just like mundane or through little things has been really beautiful and encouraging. So I think we both go back and forth encouraging each other. As far as like accountability goes, I think sisterhood is really where you're able to see that, because we both do keep each other accountable for our goals. Yeah. And going to the second part of your question, just encouraging like you and other people when it comes to competition, because it is very true that the military, there's competition. You can either handle it one of two ways. I think just looking at it from a standpoint of like, okay, like what does truth in scripture say about it? And that sounds like a really cliche, like it's a lot easier said than done. But what does scripture say? And it's for you to embody compassion and grace for others. And so when it comes to, even if that person, like, maybe you guys think differently or your personalities clash, like, again, if the leader's growing, like, you're winning. And so it's like, as a leader, like, what are you embodying? What impact are you having? And how are you growing your leadership and kind of understanding different people? So I think that a lot to do with the concept of leadership is like allowing others to grow and helping others along the way.
You guys are like the cutest twins ever. I just love your guys' dynamic. And I really liked when you guys were talking about, you guys ran on the same team. So you were like competitors in a way, but you were pushing each other to be better. And this is something me and my husband talk about a lot. Like whenever we're having an argument or something, it's like we're on the same team. But I liked the aspect of you guys are running against each other. Like you are competing, but you guys are pushing each other to be better. Like when one goes faster, it kind of pulls the other one along, and it's kind of like similar in marriage, the idea of like we're on the same team, but let's like be active and push each other to be better. So it works in both relationships. And I also liked when you guys were talking like competitiveness is just like the nature of the military and the nature like of the job sometimes, especially starting a new job. I feel like I've struggled more recently with like comparing myself to the other junior officers like in my office, and I've just been reminded kind of like the church, like we're all different parts of the body and we all have different strengths. So that's something like I've been thinking about, like, oh, I might not be like the best vessel inspector there is, but maybe I have strengths in other ways that can help benefit the office, even if I'm not like the best at my job or whatever. So I really liked talking about that with you guys and hearing your guys' perspective. And I had a question for Alyssa actually, because she is our Planting Roots marketing director. So I just wanted to ask and why you decided to become a part of Planting Roots and how you found out about it. And if anyone listening wants to get involved, how they can do that.
Yeah, for sure. So I found out about planting roots during my time overseas, so on deployment. I actually had the opportunity to facilitate a Bible study towards the end of my deployment. And at that point, I was really thinking about what I wanted to study, if I wanted to specifically study a book or kind of create my own lesson plan. And so it was through I came across the resource of Planting Roots, and I really admired its story and its mission. And so I was able to facilitate the Bible study, taking from the resources that they had online, and then honestly kind of forgot about it for a little bit. And after I got home and started really settling into my civilian job, all of a sudden one day, y'all's podcast kind of represented itself on my feed in my library. And so I started listening. I was like, wow, that's something that I had really been desiring is just fellowship with women. And specifically, I think the way that the Lord orchestrates things is something that you can't even fathom until you're sitting in and you're like, wow, that is not my own doing. That's simply the Lord working in my life. And so something that I've been able to experience through my life is the presence of military aspects of an organization such as Planting Roots being really for women in uniform and military wives. Just how I'm privileged to say that I'm part of the organization, and and then just with my role on the civilian side, I think, oh no, just the way that he's orchestrated my next step is something that is really beautiful. But yeah, so pretty much I became exposed during my time overseas, and then down the line, around like a year-ish after that, I saw Planting Roots kind of reoccur. It was a reoccurring theme, and I decided to reach out and see what availability there was as far as needs on the team, and met with Morgan Farr, who at the time was our director of operations, and I actually applied for like a journalism type role, and then I was like, I got on the phone with her. I was like, hey, like that was the only one I saw that was vacant, and to be honest, I feel like I would be more of a fit for like the marketing team or something like that along those lines. And she was like, wow, like we've been praying for that. And so that was something that I kind of stepped into. It fell in my lap, but something I've had the privilege of stepping into. So hopefully that wasn't too long-winded of an answer, but
No, that was awesome. And it's cool to see just a prime example of how God works one step at a time, and you get to a point where you're like, oh, all these pieces, they fit together.
right.
They like, wow, imagine that the God of the universe can make it all work. Yeah, so if you out there listening have any interest in military ministry for women specifically, then check out Planting Roots online if you want to be involved in our team. And also if you're just out there looking for resources for yourself or to lead a group of other women closer to the Lord, there's tons of those on the Planting Roots website as well. We recently did a podcast on the new Bible study over the book of Philippians, so that's our most recent podcast series. But Alyssa and Brianna, thank you so much for joining us today. Liz and I are excited to keep being able to talk to awesome and wise women just like Alyssa and Brianna. So thank you again for listening. We hope you join us next week. And until then, we pray you stay deeply rooted.